The story begins with the emergence of a singular figure in the American submarine service, Richard Hetherington O'Kane, a commander whose philosophy of warfare is forged in the crucible of early Pacific combat. Before he assumes command of his own vessel, O'Kane serves as the executive officer aboard the USS Wahoo under the tutelage of Dudley "Mush" Morton, a captain who fundamentally rewrites the doctrine of undersea engagement. Morton teaches O'Kane that the primary duty of a submarine is not merely to observe or survive, but to aggressively hunt and destroy enemy shipping. Together, they discard the cautious, submerged approaches mandated by pre-war naval manuals in favor of bold surface attacks, often pressing home their assaults in broad daylight or shallow waters. This aggressive mentorship shapes O'Kane into a commander who believes that the only measure of success is the number of enemy ships sent to the bottom. During his time on the Wahoo, O'Kane witnesses the brutal realities of total war. On a patrol near New Guinea, after sinking a troop transport, Morton orders the destruction of lifeboats filled with enemy soldiers to prevent them from reaching shore and reinforcing Japanese garrisons. O'Kane observes the carnage, understanding the cold logic that destroying the enemy at sea saves American lives on land. This experience instills in him a ruthless dedication to the mission, a trait that defines his leadership style when he is finally given his own command. He resolves to wage restricted warfare against the Japanese merchant marine and navy, viewing every enemy vessel as a legitimate target that sustains the Japanese war effort. O'Kane takes command of the USS Tang, a state-of-the-art Balao-class submarine built at Mare Island. He oversees its construction and the training of its crew with exacting standards, ensuring that the vessel is not only a machine of war but a home for his men. He handpicks his crew, looking for sailors who demonstrate technical expertise and psychological resilience. Among them is Bill Leibold, a driven chief boatswain's mate who shares O'Kane's intensity and serves as a critical set of eyes on the bridge. Another key figure is Floyd Caverly, a radio technician with a calm demeanor and sharp ears, essential for tracking enemy movements through sonar. The crew also includes Clayton Decker, a motor machinist's mate who finds his place in the mechanical heart of the boat, and Lawrence Savodkin, a young engineering officer whose athletic background and quick thinking endear him to the captain. Under O'Kane's leadership, the Tang quickly establishes itself as the most lethal submarine in the Pacific Fleet. In 4 war patrols, the boat racks up an unprecedented tally of sunken enemy tonnage. The crew adopts the moniker of the Black Panther of the Pacific, flying a battle flag adorned with a black panther leaping through the jaws of death, symbolizing their predatory nature. O'Kane drives his men hard, drilling them relentlessly on diving speeds and torpedo loading times, shaving precious seconds off standard procedures. He understands that in the deadly game of submarine warfare, a few seconds often mean the difference between a successful attack and a fatal depth charging. Despite the high risks, O'Kane balances his demands with a genuine concern for his crew's welfare. He secures the best provisions available, ensuring that the Tang is stocked with steak, ice cream, and fresh produce. The atmosphere aboard the boat is one of professional camaraderie, where every man knows his role and trusts his captain implicitly. This bond is tested repeatedly as the Tang endures harrowing counterattacks. During one particularly violent depth charging by a Japanese gunboat, the submarine is rocked by a series of close explosions that shatter light bulbs and knock men off their feet. The intensity of the attack rattles even the most experienced sailors, but the boat survives, its pressure hull holding firm against the crushing force of the ocean and the enemy's explosives. By September 1944, the Tang returns to Pearl Harbor after its 4th patrol, having cemented its reputation as a legendary fighting ship. The crew enjoys a brief respite, indulging in fresh food and shore leave while the boat undergoes repairs. Vice Admiral Charles Lockwood, the commander of the submarine force in the Pacific, holds O'Kane in the highest regard, viewing him as his top ace. Lockwood offers O'Kane a choice for his next assignment. He can join a coordinated wolf pack or take the Tang on a solo mission to the Formosa Strait. The strait is known as a perilous choke point, heavily mined and patrolled by Japanese anti-submarine forces, but it is also a vital artery for enemy shipping. Without hesitation, O'Kane volunteers for the solo mission, eager to return to the hunting grounds where targets are plentiful. Before the Tang departs for its 5th patrol, there are changes in the wardroom. The executive officer, Murray Frazee, who has served with O'Kane through the previous patrols, is transferred, leaving a void in the command structure. Frank Springer, a capable and serious officer, steps up as the new executive officer. The crew also welcomes new junior officers, including Paul Wines and John Hubick, young men eager to prove themselves in combat. The boat is reloaded with 24 Mark 18 electric torpedoes, weapons that leave no wake, making them harder for the enemy to spot but requiring precise targeting. On September 24th, the Tang casts off from Pearl Harbor, embarking on what O'Kane privately suspects might be his final patrol of the war. The submarine heads west toward Midway Island to top off its fuel tanks. O'Kane is impatient to reach the patrol area, cutting the stopover at Midway to a minimum. He pushes the boat and the crew, navigating through narrow channels and heavy seas with a sense of urgency. After leaving Midway, the Tang encounters a massive typhoon that tests the seaworthiness of the vessel and the endurance of the men. Giant waves crash over the bridge, threatening to sweep lookouts into the sea. The storm is so severe that O'Kane breaks his foot in a fall down a hatch but refuses to relinquish command, hobbling around the boat in a cast to direct operations. The typhoon batters the Tang for days, forcing the crew to cling to stanchions and bunks to avoid injury. At the height of the storm, the boat rolls violently, dipping dangerously close to capsizing. Water cascades into the conning tower, soaking the charts and equipment. O'Kane keeps the submarine on the surface for as long as possible to maintain speed, only diving when the conditions become absolutely untenable. The experience leaves the crew exhausted and battered, but the Tang emerges from the tempest largely intact, a testament to its rugged construction and the skill of its handlers. Upon reaching the Formosa Strait in early October, the Tang immediately begins its hunt. O'Kane positions the boat to intercept Japanese convoys moving troops and supplies to the Philippines. The presence of enemy aircraft and patrol vessels requires constant vigilance. The crew settles into a rhythm of tension and release, sleeping in shifts and manning battle stations at a moment's notice. The radar operators, including Caverly, scan their screens for the telltale blips of enemy ships, while the lookouts on the bridge scour the horizon for smoke or masts. The first contact of the patrol brings a surge of adrenaline. O'Kane spots a cargo ship, the Josho Maru, lumbering through the heavy seas. He executes a submerged approach, carefully calculating the target's speed and course. The firing sequence is a model of precision. O'Kane issues commands with a calm authority, and the torpedoes speed toward their mark. The impact is devastating. The enemy ship breaks apart and sinks rapidly. The Tang slips away, leaving only debris and oil on the surface. This initial success boosts the crew's morale, confirming that their captain's aggressive instincts remain as sharp as ever. O'Kane continues to patrol the strait, seeking out targets of opportunity. He encounters a hospital ship, illuminated and marked with red crosses. Despite the urge of some crew members to attack, suspecting the vessel is carrying troops, O'Kane adheres strictly to the rules of war and allows the ship to pass unharmed. This decision highlights his disciplined approach to combat. He is a ruthless warrior, but he retains a code of honor even in the midst of a brutal conflict. The tempo of the patrol accelerates as the Tang intercepts a series of large convoys. O'Kane employs his signature surface attack tactics, using the submarine's speed and low silhouette to penetrate the enemy's defensive screens at night. He maneuvers the Tang into the center of the convoys, firing torpedoes at point-blank range. The confusion among the Japanese escorts is total. They fire wildly into the darkness, often hitting their own ships or the water, unable to locate the phantom attacker in their midst. During one particularly intense engagement on the night of October 23rd, the Tang engages a convoy consisting of tankers, transports, and destroyers. O'Kane directs the battle from the bridge, flanked by Leibold, who relays range and bearing information. The Tang weaves through the enemy formation, firing torpedoes from both the bow and stern tubes. Explosions light up the night sky as tankers erupt in balls of flame. The Tang claims multiple victims in rapid succession, sinking the Wakatake Maru and other vessels laden with vital war material. The sheer scale of the destruction is staggering. The Tang effectively annihilates the convoy single-handedly. The crew works with machine-like efficiency, reloading torpedo tubes as the boat maneuvers to set up new shots. The heat inside the submarine rises, the air thick with the smell of sweat and diesel oil. Every man knows his job, from the torpedomen sweating in the forward and aft rooms to the electricians managing the engines. O'Kane's voice over the intercom is the steady heartbeat of the operation, guiding them through the chaos. By the end of the night, the Tang has expended most of its torpedoes and left a trail of burning wreckage in its wake. The following night, October 24th, brings another opportunity. The Tang detects a large convoy on radar, presenting a target-rich environment. Despite having only a few torpedoes remaining, O'Kane decides to attack. He maneuvers the boat into position, once again penetrating the escort screen on the surface. The Tang unleashes its remaining weapons, striking a tanker and a transport. The tanker explodes with a ferocity that illuminates the entire area, momentarily exposing the Tang to enemy fire. Japanese destroyers open up with their deck guns, shells splashing dangerously close to the submarine. O'Kane orders emergency speed, and the Tang races away from the scene, disappearing into the darkness. He is determined to make every shot count, to empty the tubes before heading home. He spots a crippled transport dead in the water and decides to finish it off. It is a target he cannot resist, a final prize to cap a record-breaking patrol. He orders the Tang to close the distance, preparing to fire the last 2 torpedoes aboard. The 23rd torpedo is fired and runs true, striking the transport and ensuring its destruction. The crew in the forward torpedo room, including Pete Nerovansky and Hayes Truck, cheer the hit, knowing that they are now 1 shot away from heading back to Pearl Harbor. The mood on board is jubilant. They have survived the typhoon and the enemy's guns, and they are on the verge of returning home as heroes. Thoughts turn to shore leave, reunions with families, and the Golden Gate Bridge. O'Kane lines up the final shot. It is 2:30 in the morning on October 25th. He orders the firing of the 24th torpedo, a Mark 18 electric model. The weapon is ejected from the forward tube, and the boat shudders slightly as the compressed air does its work. On the bridge, O'Kane and Leibold watch the phosphorescent wake of the torpedo as it streaks away from the bow. For a moment, everything appears normal. Then, the unthinkable happens. The torpedo broaches the surface, leaping out of the water like a porpoise. Instead of straightening out on its course toward the target, it banks sharply to the left. O'Kane watches in horror as the weapon begins a tight, circular turn. The gyroscope has failed, jamming the rudder hard over. The torpedo is now a boomerang, looping back toward the very ship that launched it. O'Kane shouts emergency orders to the bridge crew. He calls for full speed and a hard right rudder, attempting to maneuver the Tang out of the torpedo's path. The engines roar as the submarine tries to accelerate, but it is a race against physics. The torpedo is moving at over 40 knots, far faster than the Tang can move. The distance closes rapidly. The wake of the torpedo completes its deadly circle, aiming directly for the submarine's stern. Inside the boat, the crew feels the sudden shift in momentum as the Tang tries to turn. In the aft compartments, men look up, sensing that something is wrong. The jubilation of moments ago evaporates, replaced by a sudden, chilling realization of danger. On the bridge, Leibold watches the torpedo's phosphorescent track coming straight at them. There is no time to dive, no time to evade. The weapon strikes the Tang in the stern, roughly between the maneuvering room and the after torpedo room. The explosion is catastrophic. The detonation of the warhead, designed to break the keel of a battleship, rips open the pressure hull of the submarine. The violence of the blast throws men across compartments, shattering bones and equipment. The lights fail, plunging the boat into darkness. The stern of the Tang drops immediately, weighed down by the massive influx of water. The aft compartments, the maneuvering room, the after torpedo room, and the engine rooms are flooded instantly. The men stationed there are killed by the blast or drowned in seconds. In the control room, the shockwave knocks O'Kane's executive officer, Frank Springer, and others off their feet. Water begins to pour down through the open conning tower hatch. The boat tilts at a precipitous angle, the bow rising toward the sky as the stern anchors it to the ocean floor. The Tang sinks rapidly, the water extinguishing the diesel engines and silencing the throbbing hum that has been the crew's constant companion. On the bridge, O'Kane, Leibold, and a handful of lookouts are thrown into the chaotic sea or washed off the deck as the submarine slips beneath the waves. The bridge is submerged within seconds. O'Kane finds himself swimming in the dark, oily water, watching the silhouette of his command disappear. He is physically unhurt but emotionally shattered, witnessing the destruction of his ship and the loss of his crew in a single, self-inflicted stroke. Inside the sinking hull, the survivors of the initial explosion scramble for their lives. The angle of the boat makes movement difficult as loose gear and debris crash downward. In the forward compartments, men like Decker and Caverly realize they are trapped. The water is rising, compressing the remaining air. The submarine hits the bottom of the Formosa Strait, settling in 180 feet of water. The sudden silence is broken only by the groans of the hull and the terrifying sound of rushing water. The survivors are now prisoners in their own vessel, cut off from the surface, with the air supply dwindling and the enemy prowling above. The hunter has become the trap. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, Operation Zero. Don't forget to hit like and share this with fellow military enthusiasts. Alright, let's get back to it. The story continues in the immediate, chaotic aftermath of the Tang's destruction. While Captain Richard O'Kane and a handful of others struggle for survival on the surface of the Formosa Strait, a different and more claustrophobic drama unfolds 180 feet below. The submarine has settled on the seabed, its stern crushed and flooded, but the forward compartments remain relatively intact, preserving a pocket of air and a group of stunned survivors. Inside the control room, motor machinist's mate Clayton Decker finds himself in a scene of devastation. The explosion has hurled men across the compartment, inflicting broken bones and lacerations. Water jets in through the open conning tower hatch, threatening to drown the survivors before they can regroup. The boat lists sharply, the bow angling upward, creating a disorienting slope that makes movement treacherous. Decker realizes that the only hope for survival lies in reaching the forward escape trunk, but the steep angle of the deck and the rising water make the journey impossible. He acts on instinct and training, climbing onto the chart table to reach the manual levers for the ballast tanks. He opens the valves to flood the forward tanks, forcing the bow down. The submarine groans and shifts, slowly leveling off as it settles completely onto the ocean floor. With the boat level, the survivors in the control room, including Chief of the boat William Ballinger and the young officer Mel Enos, begin a desperate migration toward the forward torpedo room. They are driven not only by the rising water but by a new and terrifying threat: fire. The battery compartment below them has been compromised, and the mixture of seawater and battery acid is generating toxic chlorine gas and thick, acrid smoke. The air grows heavy and poisonous, burning the throats and eyes of the men as they stumble through the darkness, illuminated only by the flickering emergency lights. They reach the watertight doors separating them from the forward torpedo room, but they face a critical problem. The pressure differential between the compartments is immense. Opening the door without equalizing the pressure could result in a catastrophic blowout. Communication with the men already inside the torpedo room is impossible, leading to a tense standoff. Finally, the door is forced open, and the two groups of survivors merge. The forward torpedo room becomes a cramped sanctuary for approximately 40 men, a mixture of seasoned veterans and terrified youths, all waiting for a deliverance that seems increasingly unlikely. The atmosphere in the room deteriorates rapidly. The heat generated by the fires and the press of bodies causes the temperature to soar. The air is foul, thick with carbon dioxide and the creeping tendrils of smoke from the battery fire. Men strip down to their underwear, sweating profusely as they debate their options. There are only two ways out: the torpedo tubes, which are narrow and submerged, or the escape trunk. The trunk is the only viable option, but it is a daunting mechanism that few have ever used in a real emergency. Discipline frays at the edges. Some men, overwhelmed by the hopelessness of the situation, retreat to the bunks, lying down to wait for the end. Others, driven by a fierce will to live, begin to organize escape parties. They locate the Momsen lungs, the rubber-breathing apparatuses stored for just such a calamity. Many of the devices are unfamiliar to the newer crew members, adding to the anxiety. The first escape attempt is marked by confusion and tragedy. A group of 4 men, including Mel Enos, crowds into the tiny escape trunk. They struggle to rig the escape line and buoy that will guide them to the surface. The process of flooding the trunk to equalize pressure with the ocean outside is agonizing. As the cold seawater rises around their chests, the air pressure spikes, pressing against their eardrums and turning their voices into high-pitched squeaks. Panic sets in. Enos, unable to endure the delay, bolts from the trunk before the preparations are complete. He shoots out into the darkness of the superstructure without a guide line and is never seen again, likely entangled in the deck grating or disoriented in the black water. The remaining men in the trunk manage to return to the torpedo room, shaken and exhausted. Their failure casts a pall over the compartment. The carbon dioxide levels continue to rise, making every breath a labor. The survivors fight against lethargy and despair. Chief Ballinger, refusing to give up, rallies a second group. This time, he is joined by Decker and Officer Hank Flanagan. They enter the trunk, determined to succeed where the first group failed. The flooding process is repeated, the water inching up their bodies, the pressure building until it feels as if their skulls might crush. They endure the pain, waiting until the pressure inside the trunk matches the crushing weight of the sea outside. When the hatch finally opens, the men face the abyss. One by one, they exit the trunk, finding the guideline that stretches upward toward the faint hope of the surface. The ascent is a perilous balance between the need for oxygen and the laws of physics. If they rise too quickly, the nitrogen dissolved in their blood will expand, causing the bends or an embolism. They must ascend slowly, counting the knots on the line, exhaling steadily to clear the expanding air from their lungs. It is a terrifying climb through the pitch-black water, a test of nerve that pushes them to the breaking point. On the surface, the night is giving way to a gray dawn. Bill Leibold and Floyd Caverly have been treading water for hours, fighting hypothermia and exhaustion. They cling to each other and to pieces of debris, drifting in the strong currents of the Strait. They are joined by the few who manage to complete the ascent from the bottom. Decker bursts to the surface, gasping for air, blood streaming from his nose and ears due to the rapid pressure change. He finds a small buoy and clings to it. Moments later, another survivor surfaces nearby, screaming in agony before disappearing beneath the waves, a victim of a burst lung or the bends. The escape attempts from the Tang continue until the air in the torpedo room becomes too foul to sustain consciousness. A final group, including torpedoman Pete Narovansky and Hayes Truck, makes a last-ditch effort. Truck, discovering that his Momsen lung is defective, discards it. He resolves to make a free ascent, a technique theoretically possible but incredibly dangerous. He exhales continuously as he rockets toward the surface, expanding air rushing from his lips. He breaks the surface just as his lungs are about to empty completely, retching and gasping, but alive. By mid-morning, 9 survivors are gathered in the water, clinging to a buoy or drifting on flotsam. They are physically shattered, suffering from shock, exposure, and the physiological trauma of their escape. Their ordeal in the ocean ends not with rescue by friendly forces, but with the arrival of a Japanese patrol frigate, the P-34. The ship spots the bobbing heads and lowers a boat. The sailors on board, initially wary, pull the Americans from the water. The transition from castaway to prisoner is brutal. Once on the deck of the Japanese ship, the survivors are bound and blindfolded. They are beaten with clubs and fists, their captors enraged by the devastation the Tang inflicted on the convoy the previous night. The Japanese sailors, many of whom are burn victims from the sunken tankers, take out their fury on the helpless Americans. Cigarettes are extinguished on their skin, and they are kicked repeatedly. The survivors, stripped of their dignity and their clothes, are left to bake on the steel deck under the sun, denied food and water for long stretches. The interrogation begins almost immediately. The Japanese demand to know the name of the submarine and its mission. O'Kane, separated from his men but suffering the same abuse, realizes that maintaining total silence will only result in their deaths. He authorizes his crew to reveal the ship's name, reasoning that the Tang is gone and the enemy already knows they have sunk a submarine. This concession buys them a reprieve from the worst of the immediate violence, but their status remains precarious. They are not treated as ordinary prisoners of war but as special prisoners, a designation that strips them of protections under the Geneva Convention. After days of transit, involving transfers between ships and a train ride through the Japanese countryside, the 9 men arrive at their destination, the Ofuna Naval Interrogation Center. Hidden in the hills near Yokohama, Ofuna is not a registered POW camp but a secret facility designed to break the spirits of high-value captives. The survivors nicknamed it the torture farm. Upon arrival, they are thrown into solitary confinement in tiny, unheated wooden cells. Silence is strictly enforced. Any attempt to communicate is met with severe beatings. The daily routine at Ofuna is a cycle of deprivation and psychological torment. The diet consists of a meager bowl of watery rice and soup, barely enough to sustain life. The men begin to waste away, their bodies consuming their own muscle mass. The cold of the Japanese winter seeps through the thin walls of the barracks, and without adequate clothing, the prisoners shiver uncontrollably. They are forced to sit for hours in the Ofuna crouch, a painful stress position that strains the joints and exhausts the muscles. Interrogations are frequent and sophisticated. The Japanese employ a team of English-speaking officers, dubbed the Quiz Kids by the Americans, who use a mix of threats, cajoling, and violence to extract technical information. They are particularly interested in the American radar and sonar capabilities. O'Kane and his officers play a dangerous game of cat and mouse, providing vague or misleading answers while trying to avoid the deadly wrath of their captors. When the Japanese discover through news reports that the Tang had received a presidential unit citation, confirming its immense success, the beatings intensify. O'Kane is singled out for punishment, enduring bludgeoning that leaves him battered and semi-conscious. Despite the isolation, the survivors find ways to maintain their sanity and solidarity. They develop a tapping code to communicate through the walls of their cells. They whisper news during the brief moments they are allowed into the yard for exercise. O'Kane, though physically diminished, remains the spiritual anchor for his men. He projects an air of defiance and dignity that inspires the others to hold on. As 1944 bleeds into 1945, the physical condition of the men deteriorates further. Scurvy and beriberi become rampant. Men lose their teeth, and their legs swell with fluid. The lack of vitamins causes open sores that refuse to heal. In the midst of this suffering, a delivery of Red Cross parcels arrives at the camp. The prisoners are momentarily elated, dreaming of chocolate, cigarettes, and soap. However, the Japanese guards confiscate the boxes, looting the contents for themselves. This act of theft ignites a fury in the prisoners. Leibold and Caverly, risking execution, execute a daring raid on the supply room, stealing back some of the food to share with their starving shipmates. The nourishment provides a brief, life-saving boost, but the theft brings down the wrath of the guards, leading to mass punishments and beatings. In the spring of 1945, the survivors are transferred from the secrecy of Ofuna to the Omori prisoner of war camp, located on a man-made island in Tokyo Bay. While Omori is a registered camp, conditions are hardly better. The barracks are infested with fleas and lice, and the sanitation is non-existent. The stench of the latrines hangs heavy over the island. Here, the Tang survivors are reunited with other Allied prisoners, including the famous Marine aviator Gregory "Pappy" Boyington. Boyington, a maverick ace, becomes a morale booster for the submariners, sharing his meager supplies and his unshakable gallows humor. At Omori, the special prisoner designation continues to haunt the Tang crew. They are segregated from the general population and subjected to harsher work details. As the American bombing campaign against the Japanese home islands intensifies, the prisoners are forced into slave labor. They are marched into the ruins of Tokyo and Yokohama to clear debris and dig tunnels. The work is backbreaking for men in their emaciated state. They shovel rubble and haul timber under the watchful eyes of sadistic guards who look for any excuse to strike them. The bombing raids brings the war to the prisoners' doorstep. Day and night, the sky is filled with the drone of B-29 superfortresses. The prisoners watch with a mixture of terror and vindication as the cities around them are turned to ash. The firebombing of Tokyo creates a firestorm so intense that the heat can be felt across the bay at Omori. Ash falls like snow on the camp. The destruction of the Japanese infrastructure leads to even severe food shortages. The prisoners are reduced to eating grass, weeds, and whatever scraps they can scavenge from the garbage. The psychological toll of the captivity reaches its peak as the summer of 1945 approaches. The prisoners are living skeletons, their bodies ravaged by malnutrition and disease. O'Kane is in particularly dire straits, suffering from a severe abscess and debilitating weakness. Yet, the sight of American carrier planes strafing targets near the camp signals that the end is near. The invasion of Japan seems imminent. The guards become increasingly erratic, oscillating between apathy and murderous aggression. Rumors swirl through the camp that in the event of an Allied landing, all prisoners are to be executed. In early August, the atmosphere shifts perceptibly. The atomic bombs are dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, though the prisoners have no concept of the nature of the new weapon. They only know that the war has entered a strange, final paralysis. On August 15th, the Emperor's voice is heard over the radio, broadcasting the surrender. The prisoners, working in the tunnels, sense the change in their captor's demeanor, a sudden deflation, a loss of purpose. They are marched back to camp early, confused and wary. That night, the camp commander announces that the war is over. The initial euphoria is quickly dampened by a terrifying realization. The discipline of the guards collapses completely. Many of them, unable to process the shame of defeat, turn to alcohol. As night falls, A group of drunken guards, brandishing swords and bayonets, descends on the barracks housing the special prisoners. They scream threats, vowing to kill the Americans before the occupation forces arrive. The survivors of the Tang find themselves trapped in their wooden barracks, unarmed and defenseless, as the drunken mob rages outside. Happy Boyington and the other officers organize a makeshift defense, preparing to fight with bare hands if the guards breach the doors. A sympathetic Japanese guard, one of the few who has shown kindness, warns them to barricade themselves in. He provides nails and a hammer, urging them to seal the doors shut. The prisoners huddle in the dark, listening to the screams and the sound of blades hacking at the wood. It is the final crisis of their ordeal. Having survived the depths of the ocean, the sharks, the starvation, and the torture, they now face the prospect of being slaughtered in the final hours of the war by men driven mad with drink and dishonor. They wait in the stifling heat, praying that the dawn will bring the American fleet before the door gives way. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, Operation Zero. Don't forget to hit like and share this with fellow military enthusiasts. Alright, let's get back to it. The night of terror in the Omori barracks eventually subsides not with a massacre, but with a whimpering silence. The drunken fury of the Japanese guards burns itself out, leaving them unconscious or scattered by the morning light. The prisoners, huddled behind their nailed-shut doors, listen as the screams and threats fade into the heavy humidity of Tokyo Bay. When dawn breaks, the camp is eerily quiet. The anticipated slaughter has been averted by the collapse of discipline and the stupor of alcohol. The Tang survivors emerge from their confinement to find a transformed world. Their captors are no longer masters of life and death but defeated men awaiting judgment. For nearly 2 weeks, the prisoners exist in a strange limbo. They watch American carrier planes fly low overhead, dropping supplies and reassurance, but the occupation forces have yet to land. The camp remains a place of filth and hunger, though the fear of immediate execution has receded. The men scan the horizon of the bay, waiting for the ships that will bring their true liberation. On August 29, 1945, the wait ends. A task force of destroyers and landing craft, led by Commander Harold Stassen, anchors offshore. The sight of the American flag snapping in the wind on the approaching vessels brings men to tears. It is the first time in years they have seen the colors without fear of punishment. Landing craft motor toward the beach of the man-made island. The Tang survivors, along with hundreds of other prisoners, rush to the water's edge. Some are too weak to run. Others, like Pete Nerovansky, stand on the pier clad only in loincloths, their emaciated frames a stark testament to their ordeal. The first Americans to step ashore are greeted with a chaotic, overwhelming outpouring of emotion. Men cheer, weep, and reach out to touch their liberators, needing physical proof that this is not a hallucination born of starvation. Commander Stassen moves through the crowd, stunned by the condition of the men. The Japanese camp commander, a towering colonel who has ruled Omori with an iron fist, attempts to assert his authority one last time. He confronts Stassen, insisting that no prisoners can be released without direct orders from Tokyo. The response is swift and symbolic of the new order. Stassen physically lifts the Japanese officer off the ground, while a member of his staff jams a revolver into the colonel's face, informing him that his authority has evaporated. The power dynamic shifts instantly. The captors are now irrelevant, and the prisoners are free. The evacuation begins immediately, driven by the appalling medical condition of the captives. Triage teams set up on the beach to prioritize the gravest cases. Dick O'Kane is among those in critical danger. Ravaged by scurvy, beriberi, and a severe abscess, he weighs less than 90 pounds and cannot walk. He is carried to the beach on a litter, where a doctor initially marks him to be left behind for a later wave, judging his condition too fragile for immediate movement or perhaps deeming him beyond saving. O'Kane, summoning the same reserve of will that kept him alive in the ocean, refuses to accept this judgment. He insists on being evacuated, declaring that having survived the sinking and the camps, he will not be left on the beach now. His protest succeeds, and he is loaded onto a landing craft. As the survivors are ferried out to the hospital ships waiting in the bay, they leave behind the stench of the latrines and the misery of Omori. Aboard the USS Benevolence and other vessels, they undergo a transformation. Their rags are stripped away and burned. They are scrubbed, deloused, and showered with hot water and soap, simple luxuries that feel miraculous. They are given clean pajamas and placed in soft beds with crisp sheets. For men who have slept on dirt and wooden planks for months, the comfort is almost disorienting. On the hospital ship, Bill Leibold learns that his captain is also aboard. He seeks out O'Kane and finds him in a private room, fed intravenously and drifting in and out of consciousness. The reunion is quiet and poignant. Leibold takes an empty bunk in the room, unwilling to leave O'Kane alone. However, the Navy's repatriation machine is moving fast. Leibold is scheduled for immediate evacuation by air to the United States, while O'Kane is too weak to travel. Leibold is forced to depart without a proper goodbye, leaving his skipper behind in the care of nurses, unsure if he will ever see him again. News of the rescue flashes across the Pacific. In the United States, families who have lived in the shadow of the missing in action telegrams receive the first concrete word of survival. Ernestine O'Kane receives a message confirming her husband is alive, ending months of agonizing uncertainty. In Los Angeles, Grace Leibold is at work when a reporter tracks her down with a teletype list of survivors. The shock is absolute. She has held on to a fragile hope against the odds, and now that hope is vindicated. Her joy is captured in a photograph that freezes the moment of relief, a smile breaking through the strain of the long wait. The journey home is a staggered procession. The enlisted men, including Leibold, Decker, De Silva, and Caverly, fly back via Guam and other island bases. They arrive in California to a hero's welcome, but the transition to peace is jarring. Floyd Caverly lands in Oakland and is mistakenly admitted to a psychiatric ward due to a shortage of beds. His outrage is immediate. Having survived the madness of the camps, he refuses to be locked up again. He demands his release and is soon reunited with his wife, Leonie, and the daughter he has not seen since she was an infant. The reunion is fierce and joyful, a desperate attempt to bridge the lost years. For others, the homecoming is marred by the passage of time and the assumption of death. Clay Decker arrives at the Alameda Naval Air Station, his young son in his arms, posing for photographers with his wife. But the public image belies a private heartbreak. Once away from the cameras, his wife confesses that she had believed him dead and has remarried. The revelation shatters Decker. He has survived the torture of Ofuna by focusing on the image of his family, only to find that the life he fought to return to no longer exists. He faces a new battle for custody of his son and the reconstruction of a civilian life from the ashes of his marriage. Larry Savadkin faces a similar blow. His wife, having moved on during his absence, has started a new family. He navigates the dissolution of his marriage with a quiet dignity, choosing to remain in the Navy rather than return to civilian schooling. He finds solace in the service that defined his young life, eventually commanding his own submarine and continuing a career on the sea. Dick O'Kane's return is slower. He remains in the hospital in Hawaii for weeks, too frail to travel to the mainland. He wants to rebuild his strength before facing his family, unwilling to let them see him as a skeletal invalid. When he finally arrives in the United States, he undergoes a long period of convalescence. His physical wounds heal, but the psychological scars of the patrol and the imprisonment run deep. He is reunited with Ernestine, the childhood chum, whose memory sustained him through the darkest nights in the water and the solitary confinement of the interrogation center. Her support becomes the foundation of his recovery. In March 1946, the nation formally recognizes the magnitude of the Tang's sacrifice and achievement. At a ceremony in the White House, President Harry Truman presents Richard O'Kane with the Medal of Honor. The citation details the extraordinary aggression and skill he displayed during the final patrol, acknowledging the destruction of the convoys and the tragedy of the self-inflicted sinking. It is a moment of supreme validation, yet for O'Kane, it is shadowed by the absence of the 78 men who did not return. He accepts the honor not just for himself, but as a custodian of their memory. The other survivors, including Leibold, Savadkin, and the enlisted men, are also decorated, receiving Navy Crosses and Silver Stars for their heroism in the water and their endurance in the camps. As the years pass, the survivors drift into the rhythms of post-war America. Some, like Leibold and Savadkin, make the Navy their career, rising through the ranks and helping to shape the Cold War fleet. Leibold becomes a specialist in submarine rescue, channeling his own traumatic experience into saving others. Others, like De Silva and Decker, leave the service to build lives in the civilian world, working in industry and raising families. They grapple with the legacy of their survival in different ways. Pete Nerovansky, deeply affected by the torture he endured, finds solace in the solitude of the outdoors and the thrill of the racetrack, living a quiet life marked by the physical and emotional remnants of his captivity. The bond between the 9 men remains unbreakable. They gather for reunions, retelling the stories of the Tang and the camps, finding comfort in the only other people who can truly understand the texture of their experience. They laugh about the absurdities of their imprisonment, the thefts of food, the petty rebellions against the guards, and mourn the friends they left behind in the Formosa Strait. O'Kane attends these gatherings faithfully, even as age begins to erode his memory. To his men, he remains the skipper, the brilliant tactician who led them into glory and the steadfast leader who guided them through hell. In his retirement, O'Kane lives on a ranch in California, surrounded by horses and the landscape he loves. A remarkable coda to his story occurs in 1985, when the engagement ring he gave Ernestine before the war, lost in the sands of a Hawaiian beach decades earlier, is found by a Navy diver and returned to him. It is a small miracle of recovery, a symbol of the enduring love that anchored him to the world of the living when all else was lost. However, the shadow of the Tang never fully recedes. O'Kane battles with the guilt of survival, the haunting question of why he lived when so many of his crew died. In his final years, as Alzheimer's disease claims his mind, the past bleeds into the present. He is often found by his daughter, Marcia, standing at the edge of the ocean or reacting to the sound of foghorns with sudden urgency. In these moments, he is back on the bridge or in the water, compelled by a desperate need to save his men, to go back and retrieve those who were lost in the deep. One by one, the survivors pass away. Hank Flanagan, the tough officer whose skull was fractured by a guards club, dies relatively young, his health compromised by the beatings. Others follow, their numbers dwindling until only a few remain to bear witness. O'Kane dies in 1994 and is buried at Arlington National Cemetery, surrounded by the nation's heroes. His legacy is cemented not only in the history books but in the steel of the Navy. A new destroyer, the USS O'Kane, is commissioned in his honor. At the launch, his widow Ernestine and the surviving crew members, Leibold and Caverly, watch as the ship slides into the water, a living memorial to the man and the indomitable spirit of the Tang. The story ends with the final survivors, Bill Leibold and Floyd Caverly, maintaining their friendship into their 90s, the last living links to a legendary boat and a catastrophic night, carrying the memory of the Tang and her crew until they, too, embark on their final patrol.